friends, it's me, Em again, and welcome back to my channel where we talk about all things sinister. If you're interested in true crime or if you like all things horror related, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button. That way you can join me for some morbid conversation. So today's video is going to be a theme video. Rather than just pictures with disturbing backstories, these are all going to have a theme to them, and that theme is going to be finally free. And what I mean by that is these pictures are actually pretty famous amongst the true crime community, and they are pictures of people who have been kidnapped, held hostage, imprisoned against their will for literally years before they were able to get free from their captors. And we're going to delve a little bit into their stories and a little bit into the background behind the pictures. So with that being said, let's get to the very first picture of the bunch, and it's probably going to be the most famous story of the bunch, and that is the story of the girl in the box. Colleen Stan, who's popularly known as the girl in the box, was kidnapped by Cameron Hooker and his wife Janice in 1977. For over 7 years, Colleen was used as a sex slave by Cameron. Her claustrophobic experience would begin before she even made it to the Hooker's home, as Cameron would lock her head in a box while she was being transported to their home. From that point on, she would be kept within a coffin-sized box underneath the couple's bed for hours upon hours at a time, oftentimes for most of the day. After some time, Cameron convinced Colleen that he belonged to a company that guaranteed Colleen to him as a permanent slave, and that if she tried to escape or look for help, they would torture and kill not only her, but also her family. She had been so manipulated by Cameron that she was actually given a lot more freedom because he knew that she wouldn't risk getting in trouble with the company. The freedom ultimately led to the famous picture of Colleen hugging Cameron and looking like a happy couple. Cameron had boldly allowed Colleen to go back to her family's home and stay the night there to visit them, trusting in her fear of the company that she wouldn't attempt to escape or notify her family. And he was right. She never once tried to run, and she never gave her family any indication that something was wrong. This picture was taken the next day when Cameron would pick her up and she would go on to disappear again for the next few years, before finally escaping 3 years later. While Colleen would flee and go back home, she would stay in contact with Cameron, hoping that he would reform his ways, and it wasn't until his wife turned him in 3 months later for the kidnap, torture, and murder of another woman that he would be arrested. However, remains were never found, so there would be no charge for murder made. Ultimately, Janice would end up testifying against Cameron in court, and in doing so, she would receive full immunity. Cameron would end up being sentenced to 104 years in prison for kidnapping, sexual assault, and using a knife to do so. Our next story goes to show that just because you're a parent doesn't mean you always have your child's best interest at heart. The year is 1874, and our story centers around Blanche Monnier. Blanche came from a wealthy and affluent family and was 25 years old at the time of our story. She was seeking out marriage at this time, and because she was beautiful and came from a nice, wealthy family, she had a lot of interest. The person who caught her interest, however, was a lawyer who wasn't within the same financial and social status as she was. Her mother, Louise, argued with Blanche about her choice of suitor and said that she would not allow the marriage to happen. In order to guarantee that the marriage would not happen, Louise, with the help from her son Marcel, would lock Blanche in a room in the attic of her home for 25 years. Louise and Marcel would continue on with their lives, pretending to mourn the disappearance of Blanche, all the while keeping her hidden away. Blanche would not be found until police would receive an anonymous letter in the year of 1901 that read, "Monsieur Attorney General, I have the honor to inform you of an exceptionally serious occurrence. I speak of a spinster who is locked in Madame Monnier's house, half-starved and living on putrid litter for the past 25 years. In a word, in her own filth. Police would go to the home and upon investigation would discover Blanche in a room in the attic that was so foul from rotten food and excrement that they were unable to stay in the room for any amount of extended time because of the smell. Her mother would be arrested but would die from illness 15 days after her arrest. Her brother Marcel would be acquitted because the duty to rescue was not something that was in the penal code at that time. Blanche would end up suffering greatly from several mental health issues after she was found in the attic, including anorexia nervosa, schizophrenia, exhibitionism, and coprophilia. It was because of this that she was so far gone mentally that she would spend the rest of her life in a psychiatric hospital before she would pass in the year 1913. Our last story is another example of parental failure and probably the biggest example of long-term childhood abuse that I have ever personally come across. And that is the story of the feral child known as Genie. She was only 20 months old when her father began her isolation by locking her in a room, either strapped to a child's potty chair or restrained within a crib. While she was kept in this room, she was neglected and ignored, receiving no interaction or stimulation. She was underfed, and because of that, she was malnourished. Her father had never wanted children and had a history of abuse and neglect to his other children, but none to the extent of Genie. According to researchers, Genie would be beaten by her father with a wooden plank anytime she made noise. Not only that, but adding a whole new level of terror to his abuse, he would bark and snap at her like a dog, and he would even grow his nails out so that way he could scratch her anytime she would anger him. He would do this so often that eventually all he would have to do is make the growling noise outside of her room to get her to be quiet. If she didn't quiet, he would enter the room to scratch and beat her. This led to Genie having a horrible fear of cats and dogs as she got older. It wouldn't be until Genie was 13 years old that her mother would finally end up fighting with her father and leaving the home with Genie. Genie's mother would attempt to apply for disability benefits, but would accidentally walk into the social services office instead because of her poor eyesight. A social worker would note the sad appearance and behavior of Genie, and after speaking with her mother, would end up calling the police. Both of her parents were arrested, and Genie became a ward of the state. Upon examination, Genie had substantial mental and physical impairments because of the abuse and neglect that she had experienced her entire life. She had an understanding of less than 30 words and only showed that she could speak the phrases, "stop it," and "no more." Her lack of language was specifically noted to be caused by her isolation. She was unable to focus her eyes beyond 10 feet due to that isolation, and her skeletal frame was smaller, and her bone age was that of only an 11-year-old at the age of 13 due to her being restrained. At the time of her parents' arrest, she was 4 foot 6 inches and only weighed 59 pounds. Her motor skills were very weak, she had very little endurance, and was unable to stand up straight or to fully straighten any of her limbs. Her walk was affected so that she would shuffle hesitantly forward with her hands in front of her. Genie's development was affected so much that she would never be able to live a normal life. She would end up being passed around from different care facilities, and not much is known about her adult life other than the fact that she lived in an adult care facility. So these 3 cases and the corresponding pictures have lived rent-free in my head ever since I first heard of them. The fact that so many years of life was stripped away from these people because of a decision that somebody else made is absolutely horrible. And you look at Blanche and you look at Genie, they never even got the chance to live a normal life. Their imprisonment, the duration of that time affected them so much that they had to go on and be institutionalized. Blanche until her death, Genie for the rest of her adult life. She never got a chance to be normal. Colleen, she is better. She has written books and she has been, I mean, obviously she's still affected by it, but not to the point where she has to be institutionalized, but still, I mean, something like that being kept in a box for 7 years is going to drastically change your life and change your mental outlook. What a horrible, horrible experience. I cannot imagine every day just waking up in prison, living in a horrible, isolated world by yourself. These three women were stuck in their own heads for 7, 13, 25 years with nobody else paying them any respect. I mean, that's awful. I'm not sure if you've seen these pictures before or if this is your first time seeing them. If you've been involved in the true crime community for long, you probably have seen them before. If not, and this is the first time you've seen them, now you've seen them, and now you know a brief summary of the story behind them. If this is the kind of content that you're interested in, as I always say, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button and turn on all your post notification bells. That way you can join me the next time I sit down here for another morbid conversation. Whether you're new to the true crime community or whether you've been here for a while, we are happy to have you, and I am happy to have you on my page. As always, friends, stay safe, take care, and I will talk to you later. All right? Bye.